Hello, gentlemen. This is a tutorial um, to follow up on the previous tutorial we just watched about the scientific method, and this one will detail for you formal lab report writing. So, writing in science, we've talked in class about why scientists write about their experiments, a few reasons to summarize. They write about their experiments to share their results, to prove that they conducted the experiment, to document their findings, to maybe continue the experiment at a later time or recreate the experiment again. So a number of reasons that scientists write about their experiments. When writing about your experiments, and when writing in science, there is a very specific formula that we follow, and that's what I'm going to detail for you here in the formal lab report. I've set up for you a template that will be found in the topics page. You will make a copy of this, and you and your partner will work off of a single copy to complete the formal lab report. We're going to be conducting an experiment, growing some plants in our classroom, and that will be the foundation for our formal lab report. Let's review this template here together, and again, you'll see this in class. Note at the top that I ask you to please delete all the instructions prior to submitting the formal lab report. So for each of these bold headings here, and I'll run through each of these one at a time, you'll notice underneath is a set of instructions about what to include. So for example, with the question, this is the question that your experiment is going to attempt to answer. You would highlight and delete that instruction and actually type your question there. Remember that it's going to be a testable question, a question that we can actually answer. So that's how the deletion of the instructions works. Please make sure you're deleting instructions for each of these sections as you add your own content. All formal lab reports start with a title. Your title should somehow relate to the question you're asking. For example, if your question is asking about adding salt water instead of fresh water to water your plants, the title of your lab might be something like saltwater experiment. We move on to a testable question. Next is our hypothesis. Hypothesis is an educated guess about what will happen. It's educated because hopefully you have some prior knowledge or previous experience, and a hypothesis is written in an if, then, because statement. If this happens, then this will happen because. So for example, if we add, or let's try this, if we remove our plants from the sunlight and put them in the closet, then the plants will turn yellow because without the sun, photosynthesis becomes much more difficult. So if, then, because. It's important when working in pairs to please initial your hypothesis, so put your initials after you've written your hypothesis. Moving down to materials, you'll create a list of materials that you use in your experiment. Very important to be specific with your materials so that if someone is trying to recreate your experiment or do your experiment at a later time, they would be able to do that based on the list of materials that you leave for them. So if you need things like a graduated cylinder or a pipette or anything that you're adding to your plants, please make sure that they are included in the list of materials. Likewise, a procedure is the step-by-step set of instructions that you are going to go through to properly conduct and complete your experiment. Similar to the list of materials, the procedure needs to be extremely specific. If you are adding fertilizer to your plants, you need to document how much fertilizer, how often you're adding it. Are you diluting the fertilizer with water, or are you adding it straight to your plants? So the step-by-step set of instructions for conducting your experiment from day one all the way through the end of the experiment. The experiment will run roughly 2 weeks. Please be very specific. Think of the procedure, the step-by-step set of instructions, as a recipe to follow. It would be very hard to bake cookies if you didn't have a very specific recipe to follow. Following the procedure is the variable statement. This is where you just write a one sentence explaining what it is that you are changing from the control. If you remember back to the scientific method tutorial, the variable is something that you are testing for to see if it makes any impact on the plants that you're growing. And you compare that variable to my plants, which are the control. Moving down now to data and observations. I will share with you a spreadsheet data table where you will record and collect any of the data that you're going to gather. Most of the data we're going to collect has to do with the growth and the height of our plants, how they're growing, what they look like, if they're changing color. It will also, data we will collect will have to do with the moisture of our soil, how moist it is. And so any of this data is going to be collected here. Let me show you. This was what a data table is going to look like. And we will run through this in class, and I will detail for you the specifics of the data table. But you will provide, in this whole section here, you'll provide a link, hyperlink, to your spreadsheet data table, and that will cover all the data and observations that you're going to collect. The final part of our formal lab report is a written conclusion. The conclusion is a summary of your experiment. It starts with a restating of your question, runs through your hypothesis, runs through the data that you collected, and observations that you made, and then some statement or judgment as to whether or not your experiment was successful and what happened. So we're going to write the conclusion in 2 parts. You'll notice 8 individual statements here that you'll need to, again, highlight and delete as you add your own content. You'll run through this and do these all 8 as they are numbered here, filling in a sentence, 2, 3, 4 sentences, depending on how many sentences you need to answer each of these different sections. Okay, and then once you've completed this, think of this as an outline. Once you've completed this, we'll delete the numbers along the side here and form your conclusion into a one complete paragraph, probably about 15 sentences or so. And you'll be writing this with your partner. So this is group work that we're doing here together. So you split these up. So you each do 4 of these conclusion segments, and then it gets blended into a single paragraph. Down here, the 2 questions for further investigation. This would be just 2 simple questions. What are you curious about now that your experiment is complete? If you were to do this again, what are 2 things you'd like to explore further? Or based on the results of what you did the first time, what are 2 things you're interested in learning more about? And so that's why 2 separate questions will be placed here, 1 and 2. And these are separate from the conclusion. So that's the formal lab report. That's, again, very specific way that we write in science, that scientists write about their experiments. And I've tried to lay it out here for you. So you just plug and play. You fill in your information, you delete the instructions, and you go through this. Again, you're completing 1 of these per group. Let me show you an example from previous year. So here is a title, pollution experiment. How will adding oil affect the growth of plants. Here are their two hypotheses: if, then, because, and they have initialed after the hypothesis. They have their list of materials, their procedure. Their procedure could have been more specific. Okay, how much oil are they adding? Here's their variable statement. There's their link to their data table, observations, and their conclusion. So the conclusion, as you see, once it's all done, is a reasonably lengthy, detailed paragraph explaining the entire experiment. You'll notice that it's in paragraph form and doesn't include any of those numbers from the outline, and two questions for further investigation. Okay, that's the experiment. That's the formal lab report. We'll be going over all of this in class, but please be aware of each of the different sections of a formal lab report and my expectations in terms of deleting the instructions as you add your own content. Thank you.